My parents called off my 18th birthday. Your sister doesn't feel special enough, so I packed. Part 1. I'm Mia Chen, and I just turned 18 years old 3 days ago. But you wouldn't know it by looking at me right now, sitting in this cramped bus station at midnight with nothing but a duffel bag, a phone with 12% battery, and the weight of 17 years of being invisible pressing down on my chest like a concrete block. The fluorescent lights above me are buzzing that sickly yellow hum that makes everything look like a crime scene, and maybe it is. Maybe this is the scene where the real Mia finally stops being the supporting character in her own life and walks away from the script that was written for her before she could even speak. I should probably start from the beginning, but the beginning feels like it happened in another lifetime. The beginning was the moment I was born second, the afterthought, the we already have one, but I guess we'll keep this one too, child. My sister, Lily, came first. Lily arrived with a full head of black hair, lungs that could shatter glass, and the kind of presence that made nurses stop in their tracks and whisper about how beautiful she was. Lily was the sun, and I was the small, forgettable planet spinning somewhere in her orbit, close enough to feel her warmth but never close enough to matter. Our parents, David and Margaret Chen, were immigrants from Taiwan who had built everything from nothing. Dad worked 16-hour days at his dry cleaning business, and Mom managed the books while simultaneously managing Lily's burgeoning modeling career. By the time I was 5, Lily had already been on the cover of 3 local magazines. By the time I was 7, she had an agent. By the time I was 10, our living room wall was covered in framed photographs of Lily's face, Lily's smile, Lily's perfect posture in designer dresses that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. And me? I was the one taking the photographs. I was the one holding the reflector, adjusting the lighting, running to get Lily's strawberry milk when she got thirsty during shoots. I was the assistant, the shadow, the girl who existed to make Lily shine even brighter by comparison. Our little photographer, Mom would say, patting my head like I was a golden retriever who had learned a cute trick. Mia is so good at capturing Lily's beauty. She has such an eye for it. I never told them that I didn't want to capture Lily's beauty. I wanted to capture my own. I wanted someone to look at me the way they looked at her, with that mix of pride and adoration that made her glow from the inside out. I wanted to be the subject instead of the witness. But wanting things in the Chen household was like wishing for snow in July, pointless and slightly embarrassing. The first time I realized something was fundamentally broken in our family was on Lily's 13th birthday. She got a car. Not a real car, of course, she was 13, but Dad had a mini Mercedes-Benz imported from Germany, the kind that rich celebrities buy for their children to drive around their gated communities. Lily cried when she saw it, not tears of joy, but tears of disappointment because it wasn't the right shade of white. It was more of an ivory, she said, and she had specifically asked for pearl white. Mom spent 3 hours on the phone with the dealership trying to get it exchanged. Dad sat on the couch, massaging his temples, looking like a man who had just realized he could never give enough. And Lily? Lily locked herself in her room and refused to come out until we all signed a card apologizing for disappointing her on her special day. My 13th birthday was 3 weeks later. I got a cake from Costco and a gift card to Barnes & Noble. For your books, Mom said, handing it to me while simultaneously texting Lily's modeling agency about a last-minute cancellation. We know you love reading, sweetheart. I didn't love reading. I loved writing. I loved creating worlds where girls like me were the heroes, where the second-born wasn't invisible, where parents looked at their children equally and saw 2 suns instead of 1 sun and a distant star. But I never told them that because telling them would require them to listen, and listening wasn't something the Chen household did particularly well. By the time I turned 16, I had stopped expecting anything. I had stopped hoping that maybe this birthday would be different, that maybe they would finally see me. I had stopped dreaming of a party with friends, of candles that I could blow out while people sang to me, of that moment when everyone's eyes are on you and you feel, for just 1 second, like you matter. Instead, I spent my 16th birthday driving Lily to a photo shoot in the city, waiting for 4 hours in the car while she posed in front of a waterfall in a dress that cost more than my entire wardrobe combined, and then driving her back home while she complained about the photographer's lighting choices. "You're so quiet," Lily said that night, scrolling through Instagram on her phone without looking at me. "Why are you always so quiet, Mia?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I was quiet because I had learned early that my voice didn't matter. I was quiet because every time I tried to speak, someone interrupted me to talk about Lily. I was quiet because being invisible was easier than being seen and still being ignored. "I'm just tired," I said instead. "Same," she yawned, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "God, being this beautiful is exhausting." It was, of course, a joke. But jokes are only funny when everyone's laughing, and I had stopped laughing at Lily's self-deprecating humor years ago. The thing about Lily was that she wasn't actually cruel. She wasn't the evil sister from a Disney movie, plotting my demise and stealing my shoes. She was just oblivious. So completely, utterly, devastatingly oblivious to anyone's existence but her own that it bordered on a clinical condition. And my parents? They weren't villains either. They were just tired. Tired from years of pouring everything they had into Lily's career, tired from the constant pressure of being immigrant parents who had to prove to the world that they had made it, tired from trying to create a perfect daughter who could represent their success. The problem was that they only had enough energy for one perfect daughter. And it wasn't going to be me. The week before my 18th birthday, I made a mistake. I allowed myself to hope. It started when Mom came into my room while I was studying for my SATs. Yes, I was actually taking them, unlike Lily who had been homeschooled by private tutors since she was 12. Mom sat on the edge of my bed, which was unusual because she never sat on my bed, and she had this expression on her face that I couldn't quite read. "Mia," she said, and her voice had that soft quality that always made me brace myself for bad news. "Your father and I have been talking, and we want to do something special for your 18th birthday." I nearly dropped my pencil. "Really?" "Of course, sweetheart." She reached out and touched my hand, and I felt my eyes sting with unexpected tears. "You're our daughter too. We haven't forgotten about you." I was so desperate to believe her that I ignored the tiny voice in my head screaming that something was wrong. I ignored the fact that she had said two instead of just saying I was their daughter. I ignored the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes when she said it. "What did you have in mind?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm and measured, trying to pretend like this wasn't the moment I had been waiting for my entire life. "We were thinking of a small party," she said. "Here at home. Just family. Your grandmother is flying in from Taiwan, and we'll have your favorite food. Maybe we could even do a slideshow of photos from when you were a baby." I should have known then. I should have noticed that she didn't mention any of my friends. I should have realized that a small party in the Chin household meant the same group of people who always showed up for Lily's events, the same aunts and uncles who asked about Lily first and then remembered I existed as an afterthought. But I was 18. I was about to graduate high school. I had been invisible for 17 years, and here was my mother, finally seeing me, finally acknowledging that I deserved something. And like the fool I was, I believed her. "That sounds amazing, Mom," I said, and I meant it. I meant it so much that I spent the next week planning every detail in my head. The decorations would be blue, because blue was my favorite color and no one in the family ever remembered that. The cake would be chocolate, because I was allergic to strawberries and Lily's cakes were always strawberry. I would wear the dress I had bought with my own money from working at the library, a simple blue sundress that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I could be beautiful too. I didn't tell anyone about my plans because I didn't want to jinx it. I just waited, counting down the days with a feeling I hadn't experienced in years, anticipation. The day before my birthday, everything fell apart. I came home from my shift at the library to find Lily crying on the couch. Not the fake, performative crying she did when she was trying to get out of something, but real crying, the kind that made her face blotchy and her nose run. Mom was sitting next to her, rubbing her back and murmuring soothing words, and Dad was pacing the living room like a caged animal. "What happened?" I asked, dropping my bag by the door. Lily looked up at me with swollen eyes. "Derek broke up with me." Derek was Lily's boyfriend of 3 months, a trust fund kid who had been photographed with Lily at several high-profile events. He was, objectively, not good enough for her, but Lily had been convinced he was the love of her life because he had bought her a necklace that cost the average annual salary for 2 people. "Okay," I said carefully. "I'm sorry, Lily. That must be hard." That was the wrong thing to say. Lily's face crumpled even further, and she buried her head in Mom's shoulder. Mom shot me a look of pure irritation, like I had just kicked a puppy. "Mia, please," Mom said. "Can't you see she's upset?" I could see. I could see it so clearly. What I couldn't see was how Lily's breakup had anything to do with me. But I was about to find out. "We were supposed to go to the yacht party this weekend," Lily sobbed. "The one that everyone's going to. And now I have to show up alone, and everyone's going to know I'm a pathetic loser who can't keep a boyfriend." "A yacht party?" I repeated. "What yacht party?" Dad stopped pacing. He looked at me, then at Mom, and then back at me with this expression of guilt that made my stomach drop. "The birthday party," he said quietly. I blinked. "My birthday party? The one we're having here?" "Sweetheart, we had to make a change." Mom's voice was high and placating, the voice she used when she was trying to make bad news sound palatable. "We were going to tell you tomorrow, but given the circumstances." "Given the circumstances," I repeated, and my voice sounded distant, like it was coming from somewhere else. "What circumstances?" Lily sniffled. "I needed a distraction, okay? I can't just sit at home after getting dumped. And the yacht party was the only thing that made me feel better. So Mom and Dad said we could use the party for my distraction." "You're using my birthday party as your distraction?" I could hear my voice rising, but I couldn't stop it. "You couldn't have picked any other weekend? You couldn't have just gone to the yacht party without taking over mine?" "Don't be dramatic," Mom said, rolling her eyes. "It's not like it's a real party, Mia. It's just a small gathering. We can combine it. Lily can have the yacht party on Saturday, and you can still have your cake here." "Saturday?" The word came out like a choked whisper. "My birthday is tomorrow." "I know, sweetheart, but we had to book the yacht for Saturday, it was the only day available. Lily is taking the boat with her friends, and then we can do something for you on Sunday." Mom waved her hand dismissively. 2 days won't make a difference. You're turning 18, not 80. I looked at Dad, hoping he would say something, hoping he would be the parent who finally stood up for me. But Dad just shook his head and looked at the floor. "The deposits are non-refundable, Mia," he said. "You understand how it is with these things." I understood. I understood perfectly. I understood that I was about to turn 18, and my parents were hijacking my birthday party to throw a yacht party for my sister's breakup. I understood that in the hierarchy of needs in the Chin household, Lily's trauma over a 3-month relationship outweighed my entire existence. I understood that I had been the fool for believing, even for a moment, that I mattered. I didn't cry. That's what surprised me the most. I didn't cry because somewhere deep inside, I had always known this was going to happen. I had prepared for it the way people prepare for natural disasters, knowing the destruction was inevitable but hoping maybe this time the storm would pass us by. "I understand," I said, and my voice was surprisingly steady. "I'm going to go to my room." I walked up the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I got to my room, I closed the door and sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall. I stared at the wall for a long time until the sun went down and the room went dark, and I finally understood something that should have been obvious to me years ago. I was never going to matter in this family. Not as long as Lily existed. Not as long as my parents were too blinded by her shine to see the quiet desperation in my eyes. I could win the Nobel Prize, cure cancer, become president, and my mother would still be on the phone with Lily's modeling agent, discussing the lighting for her next shoot. The anger came slowly, like water seeping through cracks in a dam. It started as a trickle, then became a stream, and then became a flood that consumed everything in its path. I was angry at Lily for being so oblivious. I was angry at my parents for their constant neglect. But most of all, I was angry at myself for staying. For hoping. For believing that if I was just good enough, quiet enough, easy enough, they would finally see me. I was done being easy. The next morning, I woke up before everyone else. I packed my duffel bag with the things that mattered, my laptop, my journal, my favorite books, my birth certificate, my passport, the emergency money I had been saving since I started working at the library. It wasn't much, a few $100s tucked inside a sock, but it was enough to get me somewhere. I didn't leave right away. A part of me wanted to see if my parents would remember. If they would wake up and say, "Oh, it's Mia's birthday, we need to do something." But I knew they wouldn't. Lily's drama had consumed them completely, and my birthday had been reduced to a footnote in the weekend schedule. I went downstairs at 10 in the morning, and the house was chaos. Lily was on the phone with her friends, coordinating the yacht party logistics. Mom was on the other phone, calling caterers. Dad was in the garage, loading the car with decorations for the boat. "Morning," I said, standing in the middle of the kitchen. Mom barely glanced at me. "There's cereal in the pantry, Mia. We're really busy right now." "Happy birthday," I said, and the words felt like sandpaper in my throat. Mom looked up, and for a second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, maybe. Or regret. But then she shook her head and went back to her phone call. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said distractedly. "We'll celebrate tomorrow, okay?" "I promise." I looked at her for a long moment. At the woman who had given birth to me, who had held me when I was a baby, who had taught me how to tie my shoes and ride a bike and make my bed. At the woman who had slowly, over the years, stopped seeing me as a daughter and started seeing me as an assistant, a helper, a convenient spare part. "Okay, Mom," I said. "Tomorrow." I walked out of the kitchen and up the stairs, feeling like I was walking through a dream. My room looked exactly the same as it always did, my bed neatly made, my desk organized, my bookshelf filled with stories that had taught me more about love and family than my actual family ever had. I picked up my duffel bag and took one last look around. I wasn't sad. I was something else, something that felt like relief and grief mixed together into a bitter cocktail. I was sad for the little girl who had once believed that her parents would love her as much as they loved her sister. I was relieved for the woman I was about to become, the woman who was finally going to stop waiting and start living. I walked out of my room and down the stairs, past Lily who was still on the phone, past Mom who was still on the phone, past Dad who was still loading the car. None of them looked up. None of them noticed that their daughter was leaving. The front door clicked open, and I stepped outside into the gray November morning. I stood on the front porch and looked back at the house where I had spent 18 years being invisible. I didn't say goodbye because they wouldn't have heard me anyway. The bus station is where I am now, waiting for a bus that will take me somewhere, anywhere, away from here. I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know what I'll do when I get there. All I know is that I'm done being invisible. I'm done being the afterthought, the spare, the one who gets forgotten while her sister shines. The bus is pulling up, its headlights cutting through the darkness like two eyes searching for something to see. I stand up, my duffel bag heavy on my shoulder, and I walk toward it. I'm Mia Chen. I just turned 18. And this is the first day of my real life. Cliffhanger. The doors of the bus open, and I'm about to step on board when my phone buzzes in my pocket. I pull it out, expecting a text from a friend, a spam message, anything but what I actually see. It's my mother. She never texts me. She never calls me. I'm the one who always reaches out, the one who remembers to send birthday wishes and check in and make sure everything is okay. But now, for the first time in my memory, she's texting me. The message is short. Only 3 words. But those 3 words make me stop dead in my tracks, my foot hovering over the bus steps, my heart pounding so loud I can barely hear the bus driver ask me if I'm getting on or not. The message reads, "Please come home." And then, a second later, another buzz. Something happened. It's Lily. I should get on the bus. I know I should get on the bus. I've spent 18 years being the one who stays, the one who drops everything when Lily needs something, the one who puts her own dreams on hold because someone else's crisis is always more important. But the way my mother wrote "It's Lily" makes me pause. Not the usual dramatic panic, not the frantic energy that accompanies Lily's minor inconveniences. This is different. This is something else. I look at the bus. I look at my phone. And I make the decision that will change everything. I didn't get on the bus. I stood there on the curb with my duffel bag cutting into my shoulder, my phone burning in my hand, and I watched the bus doors close and the bus pull away without me. The driver gave me this look through the window, a look that said "Your loss, kid," and I couldn't even argue with him because he was right. It was my loss. It had always been my loss. But I couldn't leave. Not with those 3 words still glowing on my screen. It's Lily. Not with my mother texting me for the first time in my entire life. Not with that sinking feeling in my gut that told me something was very, very wrong. I called my mother back, my fingers shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. She answered on the first ring, which was unusual because she never answered on the first ring. She was always too busy, always in the middle of something more important than me. "Mia?" Her voice sounded strange. Not frantic like I expected. Not dramatic like when Lily's emergencies usually unfolded. This was different. This was something hollow and distant, like she was speaking from inside a tunnel. "Mom, what happened? What's wrong with Lily?" There was a pause. A long, terrible pause where I could hear my mother breathing on the other end of the line. Then she said something that I still don't fully understand. "Just come home, Mia. Please. I'll explain everything when you get here." "Explain what?" "Mom, you're scaring me." Another pause. Another breath. And then, in a voice so quiet I almost missed it. "Lily isn't who we thought she was." The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a full 30 seconds, trying to process what my mother had just said. Lily isn't who we thought she was. What did that even mean? Lily was Lily. She was perfect, beautiful, successful, adored. She was the sun that our entire family orbited around. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. What could possibly have changed that? I should have gotten on the bus. I should have walked away and never looked back. Every survival instinct I had was screaming at me to run, to save myself, to finally put my own needs first for once in my life. But I couldn't. Because despite everything, despite 18 years of being invisible, despite the yacht party and the forgotten birthday and the constant, crushing neglect, she was still my mother. And she had asked me to come home. I started walking back toward the house. The bus station was only a mile from my parents' house, a distance I had walked 1,000 times before. But this walk felt different. The streets looked different, the houses looked different, everything looked like I was seeing it for the first time through different eyes. I was halfway home when I realized what was bothering me so much about my mother's phone call. It wasn't just that she had called. It was that she had called me, not Lily. My mother always called Lily first. Always. Lily was the one she confided in, the one she leaned on, the one she treated like an adult and an equal. But this time, she had called me. The spare. The afterthought. The invisible daughter. Something was very, very wrong. When I got back to the house, I knew immediately that something had shifted. The energy was different. Gone was the chaos of the morning, the frantic preparations for the yacht party, the constant phone calls and caterers and decorations. Instead, there was a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed down on everything like a physical weight. The front door was unlocked, which was unusual because my father was obsessive about security. I pushed it open and stepped inside, and the first thing I noticed was that all the party decorations were gone. The streamers, the balloons, the fancy tablecloths, all of it had been removed. The house looked like it had been stripped of something vital, like a patient who had just had surgery. "Mia?" My mother's voice came from the living room. "Is that you?" I walked toward her voice, my duffel bag still slung over my shoulder, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. When I entered the living room, I stopped dead in my tracks. My parents were sitting on the couch, but they weren't sitting the way they usually did. They weren't in their usual spots, my father on one end, my mother on the other, both of them looking at their phones or watching television. Instead, they were huddled together in the middle of the couch, like two children who had been frightened by a thunderstorm. My father's arm was around my mother's shoulders, and she was clutching his hand like it was a lifeline. Neither of them was looking at me. They were both staring at something on the coffee table. I followed their gaze and saw it, a folder. A thick, cream-colored folder that I had never seen before. It was covered in official-looking stamps and stickers, the kind of thing that screamed legal document from a mile away. "What's that?" I asked, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. "Where's Lily?" My mother looked up at me, and the expression on her face made my blood run cold. It was the expression of someone who had just discovered that the world wasn't what they thought it was. Someone who had just had everything they believed in ripped away from them. "She's in her room," my mother said. "She's been in her room all day. She won't come out." "Why? What happened?" My father cleared his throat. He looked older than I had ever seen him. Older and smaller and somehow diminished, like someone had taken a knife and carved away pieces of him that I hadn't even known were there. "We received a letter this morning," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "From the agency. Lily's modeling agency." "The modeling agency?" I repeated. "What did they say?" My mother let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "They terminated her contract. Immediately. No warning. No explanation. Just a letter saying that they were ending their relationship with her effective immediately." I blinked. "But that's crazy. Lily is their biggest star. She's been with them for years. They can't just fire her." "That's what we thought too," my father said. "That's what we said." "So your mother called them. She demanded to speak to someone in charge. And eventually." He trailed off, looking at the folder on the coffee table. "Eventually what?" I asked, my voice rising. "Dad, what happened?" My mother reached out and opened the folder. Inside were documents, page after page of documents that I couldn't quite see from where I was standing. But I could see the photos. Black and white photos, the kind that looked like they had been printed off a cheap printer. Photos of Lily. Photos of Lily that I had never seen before. "Lily has been living a double life," my mother said, and her voice cracked on the last word. "The agency found out about it. They did an investigation. And they found." She pushed the folder toward me. "Read it yourself." I can't say the words out loud. I walked over to the coffee table, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. I picked up the folder and began to read. And as I read, I felt my world tilting sideways, felt everything I thought I knew about my family crumbling into dust. The documents were comprehensive. They traced Lily's activities for the past 5 years, documenting everything from her finances to her social life to her online presence. And what they revealed was something I never could have imagined, something that made the Lily I had grown up with seem like a stranger. Lily hadn't been just a model. She had been at the center of a web of deceit and manipulation that had been running for years. She had been running an influencer scheme, a massive operation that involved fake sponsorships, fraudulent contracts, and a network of people who had been scammed out of thousands of dollars. But it wasn't just about money. It was about control. Lily had been manipulating her entire network of contacts, from her fellow models to the photographers to the designers she worked with. She had been playing people against each other, sabotaging careers, destroying relationships, all to position herself as the one on top. And most devastating of all, she had been doing it to her own family. The documents showed that Lily had been intercepting my mail for years. My college applications, my scholarship letters, my job offers, all of it had been redirected to a P.O. box she had set up in her own name. She had been systematically sabotaging my future, ensuring that I would never have the opportunities she had. Ensuring that I would always be the one in the background, never the one in the spotlight. I felt like I was going to be sick. "This can't be true," I said, my voice barely audible. "This can't be real. Lily wouldn't do this. She's my sister." "She's not your sister," my mother said, and her voice was cold now, cold and hard and flat. "That's the other thing we discovered." I looked up from the folder. "What are you talking about?" My father reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper, folded into a small square. He unfolded it with trembling hands and handed it to me. It was a birth certificate. But it wasn't my birth certificate. It was Lily's. And it was completely different from the one I had always seen. The birth certificate listed her name as Lily Chen, but the parents' names were different. Instead of David and Margaret Chen, the names were David and someone else. A woman whose name I had never heard before, a woman who was listed as Lily's biological mother. "Lily is my daughter," my father said, and he looked like the words were being pulled out of him with a knife. "But she's not your mother's daughter. I had an affair. Years ago. Before you were born. The woman had Lily and wanted nothing to do with her, so I took her. I brought her home to your mother and told her that Lily was ours." I couldn't breathe. I literally could not draw air into my lungs. The room was spinning, the walls were closing in, and everything I had ever known was turning out to be a lie. "Why?" I managed to gasp out. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because I was ashamed," my father said, and there were tears running down his face now, tears I had never seen him shed before. "Because your mother was furious with me. Because we decided it was better to just pretend. To make Lily our daughter, to treat her like she was ours, to love her the way we would have loved her if she really was yours." "But you loved her more," I said, and the words came out like a scream. "You loved her more than me. You always loved her more than me. Because she was your secret, because she was your shame, because you had to prove to everyone and to yourself that you could love her the way you should have loved her from the moment she was born." My mother was crying now too, her whole body shaking with sobs. "We were wrong, Mia. We were so wrong. We thought we were protecting her. We thought we were making up for what happened. We never meant to hurt you." "But you did," I said. "You hurt me every single day. You made me invisible. You made me feel like I didn't matter. You sacrificed me at the altar of your guilt and your shame, and you never once asked me if I was okay with it." "I know," my mother sobbed. "I know, and I'm so sorry." "Sorry isn't going to fix it," I said, and my voice was shaking now too. "Sorry isn't going to give me back the last 18 years. Sorry isn't going to make me feel like I mattered." I looked down at the folder again, at the evidence of my sister's lies and manipulation. I thought about all the times she had smiled at me, all the times she had acted like we were sisters, all the times she had played the part of the loving older sibling while systematically destroying my future. "Where is she?" I asked. "I want to talk to her." "Mia, that's not a good idea," my father started. "Where is she?" My parents exchanged a look. Then my mother pointed toward the staircase. "She's in her room. She hasn't come out since we showed her the documents." I walked toward the staircase, my footsteps echoing in the silent house. Each step felt heavier than the last, like I was climbing toward something I couldn't come back from. When I reached Lily's door, I stopped and raised my hand to knock. And then I heard the sounds coming from inside. It was crying. But not the dramatic, performative crying that Lily was so good at. This was different. This was the sound of someone who had just discovered that the entire foundation of their existence was built on sand. This was the sound of a person who had just realized that everything they thought they knew was a lie. I hesitated. For a moment, I felt something that surprised me, sympathy. Despite everything, despite the sabotage and the lies and the years of neglect, this was still my sister. This was still the girl I had grown up with, the girl I had looked up to, the girl I had wished I could be. But then I remembered the birth certificate. I remembered the documents. I remembered the years of living in her shadow, of being invisible, of having my future stolen by someone who was supposed to love me. I knocked on the door. Cliffhanger. The crying inside stopped. There was a long moment of silence, and then I heard footsteps approaching the door. The lock clicked, and the door opened a crack. Lily's face appeared in the gap. Her eyes were red and swollen, her mascara running in black streaks down her cheeks. She looked nothing like the perfect, beautiful model I had grown up with. She looked broken. She looked human. "Mia," she said, and her voice was so quiet I almost couldn't hear it. "Mia, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I was so scared. I was so scared of being nothing. Of being nobody. I thought if you succeeded, if you got out, then there would be nothing left for me. Nothing left of me." "What are you talking about?" I asked, and my voice came out harsher than I intended. Lily opened the door wider, and I could see behind her into the chaos of her room. Clothes everywhere, papers everywhere, the walls covered in photographs of herself that seemed to mock me. On her bed was a letter, handwritten and torn into pieces. "I found out about the adoption years ago," she said. "I was 14. I didn't understand it at first. I just knew that something was different about me. That I didn't belong the way you did. So I made a decision. I decided that if I couldn't be a real daughter, I would be the best fake daughter anyone had ever seen. I would make them love me so much they would forget that I wasn't really theirs." "And you sabotaged me to do it," I said. "You destroyed my future to make yourself look better." Lily's face crumpled. I know, and I hate myself for it. But I was so scared, Mia. I was so scared that if you succeeded, if you left, there would be nothing left for me. I would have nothing. I would be nothing." I stared at her for a long moment. At the face I had known my entire life. At the person who had been both my sister and my enemy without me ever knowing it. And then I said something that surprised me as much as it surprised her. "Tell me everything. From the beginning. I want to know every single thing you've done." Lily looked at me with desperate hope. "You mean you want to forgive me?" "I didn't say that," I said. "I said I want to know everything. And then I'll decide." Lily opened the door wider, stepping aside to let me in. I walked into her room, into the chaos of her life, into the truth that had been hidden from me for so long. And the door clicked shut behind us.